All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Connect Karo. It's great to see a few familiar faces here and also a lot of new ones. And before we get started with the session today, I just wanted to give you a brief of why this area is of interest and importance to us. So while millions of lives have improved in the past decade, there has been uneven progress across the Sustainable Development Goals. So most of you know 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and under that there are about 169 sub-indicators, of which energy is linked to 74% of those, which means that energy is an enabler to achieve or enable a lot of the social development outcomes, particularly on improved health services, quality education, or improved livelihoods and opportunities to kind of alleviate poverty and promote development. But this uneven progress has primarily been seen with women, people with disabilities, and marginalized populations who continue to face systemic disadvantages. And with the need to address these systemic inequities, our thinking within WRA India has transitioned from one being of energy for development to being one on energy for equitable development. Over the past 8 years, the energy program has been supporting governments and local development institutions to ensure reliable, affordable, and sustainable energy for all, particularly in rural and underserved areas in different states. Our work has adopted a multi-pronged approach, so a four-pronged approach. First is on technology, where we've looked at demonstrating the potential of different technology solutions in meeting energy needs through pilot projects with different development partners across states and supporting in assessing the energy needs in the implementation, the procurement, the implementation, as well as evaluating the impacts of these solutions. So these projects have ranged from powering healthcare facilities to powering different farm-based livelihoods, from irrigation to cold storages to millet processing, and even mini-grid powered productive use applications. On financing, we have worked with banks, CSRs, and philanthropies to build a supportive ecosystem for financing energy services, particularly in mapping the right funding sources to the right partners and local institutions, while also building awareness of these institutions on the interlinkages between electricity and the different development outcomes that they are committed to serve. On data, we've primarily worked through a platform called the Energy Access Explorer, or EAE, which is an open source geospatial platform and is the world's first digital public good on energy transition. This tool, it's called energyaccessexplorer.org, and you can access it on your phones or laptops. It's presently present in 4 locations, so Assam, Jharkhand, Nagaland, and Mizoram. And together with partners in the state departments, we've been using these to map electricity requirements in underserved areas of these respective states, whether it is to select schools that also serve as relief shelters in disaster-prone areas, or in soul-rising community health centers in areas of high heat stress. And lastly, on policy, so based on input from our own research and research of peers and stakeholder convenings like these, we've been trying to inform policy making through mainstreaming this evidence on integrating electricity priorities in the different national and subnational sectoral policies on health, disaster management, education, agriculture, etc. And today's session speaks on creating wins in a zero-sum game, so on exploring productive uses of renewable energy for equitable outcomes. And there's no denying that, while health or education may seem more straightforward in terms of the energy linkages, because, eventually you're powering just a building, livelihoods is so much more complex with its numerous definitions and interpretations, with being farm-based and non-farm-based, with the different technologies available. And beyond this technology or end use, these projects come with a set of factors that can significantly tilt the balance of whether these solutions produce positive or negative outcomes. These can be geographical, behavioral, environmental, structural, and also power relations, such as the influence or access, that can enable or hinder the effectiveness of clean energy powered livelihood activities. And this is especially the case in rural settings, right, where the initial target of most of the interventions in this sector is for small and marginal farmers. And these factors also very importantly encompass which institutions determine how the interventions are designed, implemented, and scaled, as well as who benefits from this and how equitably these benefits are distributed amongst the community. So today's presentation and panel will, I hope, showcase why in the zero-sum game, added efforts and practices can create big wins, particularly for smallholder farmers. And together, we hope that we're able to learn from each other and, co-develop solutions and take evidence-based decisions to create an enabling environment for clean energy and the efficient use of resources to power agri-food systems. So I will just read out quick housekeeping rules before we get started. So this event is being recorded and will be uploaded on WRI's YouTube channel. I request everyone to please keep your phones on silent. In the interest of time, we have placed QR codes on the desks where we will request you to actually scan and ask questions through those. We're just doing this to save time, and we can also gather more number of questions. On the flip side of it, there is also a QR code to access all our publications on this and other relevant topics. And for any feedback, please write to us on the email mentioned here, and also reach out to us during the event. So I'd like to first call upon our esteemed panelists on stage. I'd like to invite Ganesh Neelam from Sustain Plus, Biswaroop Banerjee from IKEA Foundation, Neha Dhingra from CLASP, Nitin Akade from the Clean Energy Access Network, and Harsha Meenawat from WRI India. Please give them a round of applause. And I'll now pass it on to my colleague Arundita for a quick presentation and to take the session forward. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm going to share our research on productive use of renewable energy on behalf of the team and the authors. So here's a brief background that I want to start with. So the average monthly income of an agriculture household in India from all major sources is a little over 13,500, which is around 455 rupees a day. And out of that, the farm income is around 4,500. And a vast majority of farmers in India are small and marginal, with an average holding size of not even 1 hectare. So impacts of these precariously low levels of income and fragmented land holdings are exacerbated with climate shocks, with low access to infrastructure and market volatilities, which makes agriculture and the livelihoods of people dependent on it extremely fragile, or as is colloquially referred to as a gamble. Also, the intersection of gender, socio-economic categories, and location of people, and amongst other factors, sort of enhance the challenges people face in building their livelihoods. And also whether it determines whether they can participate in excluded or included from agricultural decision making. Also sort of making agriculture, as Lanman was saying, zero-sum game. So the productive use of energy is really the utilization of energy for activities that enhance income and well-being in the rural context. So when we say productive use of renewable energy, we use renewable energy for the same purposes. So for example, using solar energy for agriculture or powering health centers in rural areas. Now, these interventions are emerging as enabling solutions to fill the critical infrastructure gaps across the agri-food value chains, especially for smallholder farmers. Now, we all know that the agriculture sector relies heavily on electricity for activities such as irrigation, which can improve productivity, on storage and agro-processing, which can reduce other post-harvest losses or can add value to the raw agricultural product, and for other productive use applications. So universal access of electricity and other modern and reliable energy sources is crucial across the agriculture value chain. For building resilient food systems. However, these pure technologies are facing barriers to scaling, and policy and institutional impacts have largely been limited to farmers who are able to pay the initial upfront costs and have large land parcels. Evidence shows that there are about 20 types of livelihood applications that have been significantly deployed at scale across farm and non-farm sectors in India. We were sort of motivated to do this study due to three reasons. One is that we found that there's limited nuance information on challenges across the pure intervention stages, particularly pertaining to sustaining livelihoods. So we studied the various implementation, business, and financing models of pure integration in the agri-value chain. And we also studied the multifaceted barriers and drivers. Second, we found that there are lack of comprehensive insights on how pure works in complex contexts from anchor institution perspective. So we spoke to various anchor institutions like enterprises, NGOs, government bodies, and also farmer cooperatives and collectives who are implementing these solutions on ground. And to understand their drivers and barriers. And finally, when the existing documentation of Pure focuses mostly on, say, the technical or the financial or economic aspects of Pure, and the socio-economic aspects of Pure and how that impacts the implementation of Pure is largely overlooked. So we study the issues of differential access, the nature of participation of farmers, benefit sharing, and power relations encountered in the pursuit of sustainable livelihoods through Pure. We studied 21 solar-powered livelihood interventions across 9 states in India, including irrigation pumps that were drawing water from rivers, canals, and groundwater, cold storages that were meant for horticulture and dairy products, and agro-processing units such as millers, dryers, pulverizers, decorticators, etc. We studied these technologies based on their varied level of maturity in the sector, and we selected these states based on literature review, technology scoping, and the anchor institutions that we could reach out to. Now, to analyze these data that we collected, we used a sustainable livelihoods framework. This framework helped us to study the multifaceted vulnerabilities that exist in a particular context and how in different contexts with access to a range of livelihood assets, people are combining like various strategies to create livelihoods. So for us, from the perspective of this study, one such strategy is access to tailored, pure applications that can help support livelihoods by addressing the lack of reliable and affordable energy. This framework also helped us in understanding or analyzing Pure in the context of relational power dimensions, such as the role of gender, socio-economic categories, landholding sizes, and other dimensions that are associated in these local areas with shaping livelihoods, and Pure, of course, as a driver in that. Now, here are some limitations of the study. One, that we studied 3 technologies as 3 pure technologies, as we all see, which leaves out other application, especially the ones in the non-farm sectors, which are relatively nascent in their development. And second, we present findings of the interventions largely from the perspectives of anchor institutions and not end users, which may introduce bias. However, when we traveled to these locations to conduct interviews with anchor institutions, we also visited the installation sites and conducted informal conversations and group discussions with farmers and farmer groups, which helped us sort of reflect on our findings and sharpen them. Now, here are some findings from the study. So, in the study sites, we found that the need for Pure emerged from deep-seated structural challenges as well as climate extremities. For instance, across the irrigation sites, erratic rainfall and a lack of appropriate and reliable irrigation technology sort of force the farmers to depend on unreliable grid-powered irrigation pumps or costly and polluting diesel-powered pumps. And we found that the position of anchor institutions, like their positionality, their objectives and goals, actually play a critical role in, even though in varying degrees, but they play a critical role in determining the experiences and outcomes of these interventions. Now, here are some technology-wise insights. In the solar irrigation interventions, the criteria for inclusion of farmers was dependent on farmers' ability to invest in the irrigation system. It either a portion of the capital cost, or they could invest in, constructing bore wells or laying underground or overground pipes for delivery of water, or also their availability of contiguous land at their disposal, which could be irrigated. So being the most mature technology in our study across all the technologies we studied, the operations and maintenance, or O&M, of irrigation systems were taken up by farmers and farmer groups with after capacity building support from anchor institutions. However, we also found that except in 2 cases, all other irrigation interventions were designed as standalone interventions. What I mean is that, there was no backward or forward linkages that were designed in addition to the technology. So in the form of no farm support or extension services or linking farmers' products with the market was associated with that design. In terms of cold storage, the operations of cold storage units were highly dependent on the anchor institutions. Across the sites, we saw there's limited utilization of these units, primarily due to the immediate cash requirement of the smallholder farmers, because these farmers are motivated to sell their products as soon as they harvest for that cash, and there's sort of very little incentive for them to change their behavior towards starting to store crops. So these large size facilities without adequate market linkages could rarely meet the need of small and marginal farmers. And, it's unfair to expect them that they would be able to commit to year-round supply of horticulture crops to keep these storages going without any incentive. Except one dairy cold storage unit, which is a rather established value chain, none of the cold storage we studied were able to function effectively. The agro-processing units we found carry significant potential of being embedded in the local contexts and were integrated into the self-help groups and the FPO systems. These units were owned and operated by farmer collectives, and the anchor institutions or technology providers, when they're designing these interventions, they are also inevitably designing market linkages with these kind of interventions, which sort of links their finished or value-added products, farmers' products to markets, which provides farmers with increased or stable income. However, there's a caveat here that in the long run, it can limit farmers' autonomy and their an opportunity for them to explore or build their market negotiation skills, because they are bound by these rigid buyback agreements with market actors. In terms of financing these pure technologies is concerned, what we found that there was a mix of resource mobilization and risk sharing, and government subsidies and donor grants really played a crucial role in reducing the initial capital burden on small farmers and farmer groups, which really underlines the significance of external funding support if we want to, go for large-scale adoption or scaling of these technologies still. For running the operations, the models adopted various revenue-generating mechanisms. Well, I also would like to highlight that in some models where we found that the community-based organizations were involved in financial management, community-based organizations, and we found various manifestations of that, like SHGs, FPOs, but also water user groups, village electrification committees, etc. When they involved them in the financial management, this sort of created pathways to decentralize risk and build local capacities, and also fostered a sense of ownership and accountability in the community. As far as the implementation model is concerned, we categorize the implementation models into 3 categories, 3 groups based on the issues of access and power relations. One was where the designed pure solution is developed and transferred to individual farmers or farmer groups, either directly or through extension agents. Second, on the other side of the spectrum, is when the pure solutions are designed integrating the needs of the community who also often participate in implementing these interventions. And the third one is somewhat in between the two, where the process of designing pure intervention is mixed and the needs of farmers are incorporated while transferring these solutions. Also, we found that though these community-based organizations such as SHGs, etc., are increasingly starting to take ownership of the assets and of the operations and maintenance, they are yet to indicate shifts in terms of building self-reliance or local governance, which is inclusive or equitable, which sort of we should all work towards. And finally, here are 5 key considerations for critical stakeholder groups, stakeholder groups of pure ecosystem. For anchor institutions, it is important to acknowledge differential nature of access and integrate inclusivity in their project design since the beginning and also across all the stages of their implementation. They should also leverage and strengthen community governance structures so that these institutions can then are then skilled to take these interventions forward. For technology providers, it is important for them to provide continuous post-installation support or capacity building support to anchor institutions as well as end users, which are the farmer groups, and also create systems in the local and remote areas to enable the same. And they should connect end users with markets for their products and services so that it increases the income generating capacity of these technologies itself. For policymakers, policies can be designed pivoting demand and not really based on supplying one size fits all technologies to all places. And policies should support the whole value chain rather than standalone technologies. We have examples like PM Sampada Yojana, which focuses on both agro-processing and cold storage, but there are very few examples like these. In fact, none. So the financiers should encourage a value chain approach in their funding or a geographical approach rather than a technology saturation approach to mitigate risk. And they need to invest in technologies and innovations which sort of reduces O&M costs, which makes the technology more energy efficient, user friendly, more standardized, and also grid compatible. So finally, we need to recognize that there is significant transaction costs involved in creating and sustaining livelihoods through pure, and cross-cutting considerations such as equity, that we don't leave behind people who may need it the most, and strengthening partnerships at multiple levels, and robust evaluation and monitoring to create evidence and trust in the sector should be integrated into the pure interventions. That will be all from this research. Thank you so much for listening. I would now shift it to Harsha to take the panel forward.
Thank you so much, Arundita. It is my pleasure to welcome you all today and to also welcome our esteemed panelists who actually do represent the 4 sort of groups that you saw in the last slide that Arundita presented. We have Ganesh, who leads one of the largest anchor institutions, if I can call them, Sustain Plus. Nitin, who represents the Clean Energy Access Network, a network of enterprises that work in this particular space. Neha, who represents CLASP, who do input a lot into the policy aspects of technology adoption and technology transfer itself. And Biswarup from IKEA Foundation, who is one of the most, I would say, the organization that has supported a lot of the ecosystem development in India in this aspect. And so maybe let me start with, asking you all to reflect a little bit based on your own organizational strategy in terms of what Arundita just presented, and how does tackling issues of equity through your own strategy in which relates to energy interventions, how do you tackle the issues of equity, so to say? So maybe Ganesh, if we can start with you.
Thanks, Harsha. So the point that Harsha mentioned, and also the points that came up in the presentation, if we talk from Sustain Plus's perspective, again, we are an organization which works with multiple like-minded organizations. So we are not the organization which is there going on the ground and directly doing work, but work with various like-minded organizations, be a non-profit, be a community-based institutions, or technology partners and financing institutions as well to look at. Now, in that approach, when we are getting into these partnerships, the focus has been how do you look at the emphasis being more on the communities which are underserved or unserved. So that's the core. That's something that we basically would not move outside of to look at. And with that approach, when we engage in a particular geography, we try and see that the type of community, the aspirations or the demands or the challenges that these communities are facing, and how we can, as a team, work with the partners to address those particular points of aspirations of the community. And the reason I'm not emphasizing on challenges is I think all of us keep on talking about challenges, but the aspirations of these communities are also very, very important for us to understand. And how, once we understand these aspirations, work with them to address those aspirations has been an approach. So the element of looking at underserved, unserved communities, small and marginal families, women specifically in the larger engagement of our work has been the core for us also to be an organization in presence to look at. And that's where the emphasis has been on how we look at the inclusion, the equity related aspects. Now, there have been certain, I would say, learnings as well in the journey that we go, because these are, again, important and heavy words, but when we get it on the ground, all of us know the ground contexts are very, very different. So what we have learned is whenever we are working with a partner and we are building on something that the partner has done on the ground, and energy, I think, as was mentioned in the initial points, that energy is an enabler, and energy as an enabler is coming wherein a certain base of work has been done, be it in agriculture, be it on the institutional strengthening. And when energy comes and plays an enabler role, it tries to accelerate the whole action. Now, in that context, there are situations on the ground wherein you see that within the larger community base, there would be certain set of families or community members who are ready to take that risk. We normally call them as low-hanging fruits within the larger geography or the context where we work. And that is also, I feel, a good building base for us to see how the next level of growth or the next level of scale happens. Now, in that case, maybe you're not looking at the inclusion right in the beginning, but with an approach of saying inclusion from a scale, inclusion from a long-term engagement perspective is very, very critical to look at. And how do you build that inclusion on the ground with the community, with the partners to look at is something that we at Sustain Plus try and focus on. And as I said, it all builds on the strong base that the partner has on the ground. And certain, I would say, non-negotiables for us have been to see how women play a very important role in this whole journey. And not only saying that we are trying to build the trainings or capacities, but to see how the leadership and the empowerment could be built within the women. And this, again, all of us know cannot happen in a period of 1 year or 2 years or 3 years, which normally projects run on, but it needs a long-term engagement. So how do you also build that opportunity from a long-term perspective to empower, build leadership within the community, especially women? And then the growth is something that gets driven a bit in agriculture or the allied sector. So that's how, Harsha, currently we as a team are trying to see to bring this focus on inclusion. And as I emphasized, the core is to see how we work with underserved and unserved communities. And that's why you will see us mostly in geographies wherein maybe the larger community ecosystem has not been what you call proactively trying to focus on. So be in East India, Northeast India, or parts of what you call Western India, wherein the community needs this type of engagement more. And that's been something that we are trying to do along with a lot of other partners to look at.
Thanks so much, Ganesh. I mean, I agree with you. The fact that energy is an enabler, and usually it should come after a lot of the groundwork has already happened. And perhaps that groundwork then also needs to be focused in the sense that are we really developing are we really being able to assess the differential needs of the particular geography that we are functioning in? And so perhaps a lot more hand-holding to the partner organizations in that aspect becomes it becomes very, very important.
Yeah, completely. And I think the selection of a right partner also becomes very, very critical in this case. And again, we try and look at partnerships wherein the larger approach is matching, wherein, like, for example, women inclusion, looking at small and marginal. So that, I suppose, are something that we call as non-negotiables, are very, very critical for us to build the partnership further along with them. And that's something that, again, there are certain challenges that continue to happen. I'm not saying everything is completely the way one expects it to go, but with these challenges, I think you get more opportunities to see how work can happen further.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for that, Ganesh. Let me come to Nitin. Nitin, you are president of the Clean Energy Access Network. It's an association body which represents the interests of energy enterprises in the DRE sector. From that association members' perspective, how do you see your members actually integrate equity in the project cycle considerations that they undertake? Especially in designing maybe technologies for particular contexts, or perhaps looking at pre-installation work, post-installation work. So maybe some perspective from your members, if you could bring it.
Yeah. Thank you, Harsha. And Clean is a network what was formed in 2014 to take electrons to the last mile. Now the journey has been somewhat successful. Reliability is an issue. But now from that electrons can we make to economic development? That's the next journey we are seeing in next 10 years of Clean. At least at the institute or the members, what they're asking us, right? Because it's a body of the member, by the member, and for the member. I think that's what the narrative is. And very interestingly, how the narrative has changed. While taking the electrons, people are trying also to find out livelihood opportunities for improving the quality of the life of the people. For example, I'll just give practical insights how our members work. Suppose you go to Meghalaya in Ribhor district or West Jayantia. It's an amazing Iri-silk value chain belt. Almost 6% of the GDP is contributed through Iri-silk. There is potential for 20%. But what is hampering that? Silk spinning is given definitely by the members. The main issue here is, are we getting disease-free eggs? Are we getting castor leaves to eat that worm? That can be solved, right, with the integration of different institutions. The bigger problem was, they are just doing 2 cycles per season. One cycle is 40 days, so 80 days in a year. Technically, they should do 6 cycle or 8 cycle. Why it is not happening? So understanding that pain points, converting that pain points into technical specification, and the technical specification into a product, and then a sustainable business model. I think that is the role of Clean members evolving, and that's a shining example that members have taken responsibility among themselves to evaluate themselves or to evolve this role. Now what happened? Why it is not happening the cycles 4? Because Meghalaya doesn't have 23-degree temperature and 80% humidity, which is required for silkworm to grow. There are silk Samagra scheme there. Lot of storehouses has been established, 339 across Meghalaya 11 districts. For helping, that's the right intent of the government of Sericulture and Central Silk Board. But we need a temperature control unit. And one of our proud member who got this air handling unit, and the things are solved. And already we are into 4 cycles now in last 6 months. So I think this is the shining example how collaborative model is working within the network. We have an NGO supporting that with the local NGO. We have this air handling unit person doing things. We have local institutions like MBMA, Meghalaya Basin Management Authority, because that's a very important institution, and IVCS, Integrated Village Cooperatives. So I think this is an approach that has really worked in Meghalaya, and members are really coming forward and innovating the solutions. So that has worked in Meghalaya. Nagaland is feed. Another 14,000 crores is spent on feed for fish, pig, cows or cattle, and for goat. It's a big industry, and it's all import. Right? Okay, from other state or from outside. Then other challenges are there. Why it is not growing? Yeah, raw material feedstock is a problem. And there are challenges where DRE solutions can come and really solve that. So that's a big market Nagaland is witnessing across 17 districts. Where DRE is a solution because a lot of these machines are operated on diesel. And Nagaland is a state which is just consuming 200 units per capita annually. Poorest in South Asia also, not India. So there's an opportunity to bridge that. Similarly, when we go to other part of our country, come to East India. If you go to Jharkhand, like Latehar, Daltonganj, Palamu, these are pulses producing belt. When I started my journey from other head of CS, I thought, why we are importing 40% of pulses? तुअर दाल, लाहर दाल, क्यों हम बाहर से मंगा रहे हैं? तो मैं मोजाम्बिक चला गया, वहां पे खेती लिया इंडियन लोगों ने, और वहां पे खेती हो रहा है मोजाम्बिक में, और वहां से इंपोर्ट करके हमारे गुजरात में मुंद्रा पोर्ट है, वहां पे आके प्रोसेसिंग होता है. So I thought farm size are getting larger and equipments are not tend to cater to that. So that was one of the study I think you have on pulses processing in Rikwa. That's one of the plant was commissioned with high-tech things and bottom-up approach. So these are some of the initiatives taken by members in Jharkhand and other UP also in Tamil Nadu. I'm covering India mostly so we don't miss any part. And UP, people have innovated their way of finding businesses. It's very difficult sector to make money, to be very honest. And money matters. We have to feed our employees and to grow the economy. So Atta Chakki, 85 districts. Each district has somewhere around 1,000 or 700 villages. Each village has 1 or 2 Atta Chakkis powered by diesel. So see the market. And diesel consumes a lot. 1 liter of diesel will give you 3 units of electricity. So technically 30 rupees per unit. Solar and battery makes a sense at 12 or 14 rupees also. And now banks are coming forward, not the public or private sector bank, MFIs. And lending, but the cost of lending inside, still it's making business sense for people. So now that's an urge and that's what industry we are taking it forward to. Bankers, guys, come forward and lend for the sector. It will really create an economic impact. You move to Tamil Nadu for transgender segment, a lot of sewing machines has been involved there. And now they are contributing actively for the economic development of their own and for the region and for the livelihood. So this is work what has been done by Clean and its member in India. When you talk about global reference, because a lot of examples are taken from India to Africa. A lot of members are looking at that market. Those stakeholders are different. But now Indians are looking at that geography. If you see Exol machines, right? It's one of the good energy efficient milling machine, really enabling women-led milling opportunities in Africa. Just 1 kilowatt, unheard of milling at 1 kilowatt. अब देखिए आटा चक्की 5.5 7.5 HP का होता है, right? उसको बड़ा पावर लगता है, and then cost infrastructure increases. So that's one thing. And then micro pump. We were in Zambia. We give solutions at $15,000 also for 3 hectare borehole सब करके. But there are pumps innovated at less than $200. क्या करते हैं वो? अपना एशियन पेंट का बकेट रहता है, राइट? उसको केसिंग बना देते हैं स्लाइस करके और उसमें एक्वेरियम का पंप डालते हैं 100 वॉट का एंड देन 10 मीटर का पाइप देते हैं. इट कैन इरिगेट half a lima. Lima is like a half a hectare of land. So you gradually increase their income and then take them to the next level of intervention. So these are innovations and efforts being taken by members across the network and there are positive shining. So sector is not going anywhere down or up. I think we are there to prove, I think we'll contribute to the nation's economy. Yeah, thank you.
Great. Thanks for that, Nitin. I mean, I'm reflecting on what you said. So I'm hearing that, of course, the choice of geography for your interventions from the energy enterprises becomes very important. And then the size of the technology provision that you are doing, let's say, for example, smaller size pumps, for example, or smaller sized productive applications that are required there, then that becomes important. But the challenge that we see, at least, and we've seen from this research as well, is that post-installation support is what makes or breaks, whether a particular intervention flies or it fails, right? And so that's something that I'd like you to talk a little bit more in terms of how are your energy enterprise members actually, trying to overcome that challenge. It does have a transaction cost, but then how are those costs actually being overcome? Because the segments that you want to work with need a lot more handholding as compared to the segments that will be able to adopt it on their own. So could you reflect a little bit on that?
I think after sales is a very important thing. In most of the interventions also, So what we have seen, at least what we encourage our members also, so the hand holding should not be just to give money, cash and carry, right? Model. You give equipment and you go. So most of them do stay with the community for 3 to 4 years, and that's the time period we have seen people are uptaking, and that started building in their own workforce to repair. We did had challenge with couple of our interventions members had, but then they were trying to have this collaborative model. What they did very interesting in Meghalaya and Nagaland, and that is a success story on replicating these installations and maintaining them successfully for more than 5 years now. That's on record. Is they got young boys from Garo Hills to Bangalore. 15 of them. They trained them from 3 months. हार्डकोर इन्वर्टर को रिपेयर कैसे करना है, स्ट्रीट लाइट को, बैटरी को टेस्टिंग कैसे करते हैं, and then they went there and entire installations in these 11 districts are managed by these young Garo boys and Jaintia boys also. So I think that's where the synergy comes. There are challenges also, and the main challenge in our sector is we don't have monitoring of where these livelihoods are. So I think that's also what MNRE has recommended now, and we are coming up with a live portal. Thanks to UNDP for contributing something on that, and it will be a national portal going ahead, where now 400 systems are online, almost 200 plus, another 100 will come online, which will really track the system on day-to-day basis on electrical utilization as well as the outcome that might benefit for policy making and contribution to the larger goals, where the money then can start flowing and help the sector to scale.
Thanks for that additional input. Neha, let me come to you, and hearing what Nitin's just said, there is a role of innovation and technology in itself, and the related policy questions that come from technology transfer in general. So energy efficiency, for example, what is the role that energy efficiency can play in bridging the gap between improved energy access, and also improving economic viability for a lot of these interventions? Because unless they make unless they're economically viable, they're not going to make sense. But then how do we put these considerations together of energy efficiency, improving access, creating economic viability, but then also trying to meet the needs of the small and marginal groups? A request to all audience members, if you have questions, please see the QR code on your tables or on the screen, and please add your questions to the Menti. But Neha, your comments.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to congratulate Harsha and your team for bringing all of this together. It was very interesting for me to look at the analysis and all the effort that has gone into putting together all the work that has gone on the ground and synthesizing it and bringing it up at a level where we can, cull out some insights and findings. So that was very interesting. I'd like to also take 30 seconds to talk about some of the synergies that I see from the work that we have been doing. And it's good to see the reinforcement and complementarity, and it kind of helps build the confidence of people in terms of, what different interventions are and how everybody can kind of come together in complementing some of those. So first was around, thing that resonated very well with me was around scalability of Pure. I think that remains a big challenge, and that's something that we all have been kind of trying to look at and address. We are doing our own bit through different interventions at different levels and layers, but scalability remains a key challenge. Second, which was very, very important, and you emphasized it enough, around role of anchor institutions in mobilizing the ecosystem, and that remains a key area which is not often talked about or as much talked about. Third was around consumer confidence, and that's where the bit that you spoke about around O&M after sales performance kind of comes in. And fourth was around basically market linkages. So I thought those 4 points are some things that we notice and observe and we feel, but the way you kind of put it together, I think that made a lot of sense. Now, in terms of your responding to your question around the role of innovation and policy, we try to look at it through three aspects. One is working with policymakers, standard making agencies in coming up with policies which are focusing on long term. They also provide confidence to the consumers in terms of the standardization and quality of product. And that's where the second bit comes in, which is the product, the confidence in the product. And third is around mobilizing ecosystem. There are all of these players that we all spoke about, community-based organizations, technology suppliers, financing institutions. But the overall idea is how do we bring them all together to interact with each other? And in that, the role of community-based and anchor institution kind of comes into play in a very significant manner. We try to address it through engaging with 4 key stakeholders, which also very well aligns with the presentation, the slide in the presentation, so that Arundhita had. So first, we engage with manufacturers across the world, both in Africa as well as in India. And we have a platform called Verasol, which kind of conducts testing of different products and puts out product performance for several of these pure-based technologies. It gives confidence to the consumer. It gives confidence to the product manufacturers as well as suppliers and policymakers if they were to kind of design a standard or develop an efficiency policy. And then the second category of stakeholder that we engage with is policymakers, where we provide all that data and evidence to them that this is the kind of market, this is the kind of data that exists, and how do you kind of develop and design policies which can enable adoption of these appliances. Third is financing institutions and demand aggregation agencies to help unlock scale, to catalyze financing towards the sector. And fourth is engaging with community-based organizations to understand how those products are performing. Because as you all mentioned, these people don't have a big history of owning these products. Here we are talking about communities which are marginalized, who do not have access to energy, who do not have access to reliable electricity. So how do we work with community-based organizations to ensure there's a feedback channel about what people think and feel about these products, what kind of O&M mechanisms exist, and how does that kind of get integrated in the policy or the standard making? So those are some of the aspects that we try to look at in order to ensure there is two-way communication and the scale-up kind of happens in the overall process.
Yeah, thanks so much, Neha. I the 2 points that I take away from what you said. So the reality of having of creating policy inputs to enable adoption of technology that are based on a study of variety of contexts and not just a few locations. And then that, of course, by itself is a large endeavor to test out appliances and applications in different contexts and different user groups and a variety of people who would then adopt them. And secondly, this trend that we are seeing of energy enterprises becoming anchor institutions and more having the need to have legs on the ground and deeper networks in the locations that they are functioning in, because they're not just responsible for their own businesses anymore. They are actually responsible for the outcomes that they create with the development outcomes that they create with the businesses. And so, putting enterprises in those shoes may be a little new for us, but it seems to be the trend. Would you agree? And how should we approach this trend?
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree with you, because these products are slightly different. They are much more customized. Some of them are commercialized and others are nearing a commercialization stage. So it's slightly different segment. In fact, it's very different segment than the usual on-grid space, where there are ACs and fans, which are much more established, or lights, which are much more established. The market is established. People have tested it here. And the audience is also very different. You are catering to people who do not have access to reliable electricity, where O&M, the adoption and all of those challenges also come into play. So, and word of mouth kind of plays a big role. So if we have to think about building consumer confidence, increasing adoption of these appliances and linking it with the livelihood, it's a much more complex problem that we are trying to resolve. And in that case, if entrepreneurs, even if it's a profit-oriented organization, if they have to succeed, then they have to take some of these things into account. So I'm not necessarily of the view that the role of anchor institutions should be played by these organizations, but in this case, the role goes a little bit beyond being the usual product supplier as it happens in the other products, the standard products.
Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, it builds to this question that, okay, we are seeing the need for more research. We're seeing the need for more data. We're seeing the need for more capacity building. We're seeing the need for more after-sales service. The more, and the list keeps going on. The transaction costs keep going on with each of these additional requirements and additional costs being incurred, which brings me to Viswarup. What's the appetite of funding organizations then, to invest in programs that then need long-term support and not just provision of products, as we have seen the DRE sector grow in the past, which was focused on products. But now we need to focus more on services and actual larger implementation models.
A couple of points I'd like to highlight in here. One is, of course, just taking a step back, and I think we need to be mindful of the fact that we are here not talking about technology-centered development, right? We are actually talking about solving some problem which are really can make a meaningful dent to the life and livelihood of people. So technology here comes as an enabler, right? And what and the context, the variables, I as you are highlighting, right? It's so difficult and changing across different geographies and different population segment and all, right? So while we also see there are promises in terms of the demographic shifts that's happening in the rural area, so in terms of people becoming more kind of friendly to technologies and all, so that provides definitive opportunities of more absorption of technology going forward, right? But at the same time, it has to be very it has to solve the real problems of people, right? So like, for example, if you see, say, for example, the mobile phones, which is ubiquitous, everywhere, right? Everywhere has adopted, and people use it as a communication device for different purpose, right? And we never looked at from kind of livelihood perspective, but it really aids livelihood of people, right? If you go to the fishing community, they coordinate in terms of fetching the best prices for their product, right? So we have to be creative around the problems, and we have to be creative around the solutions that we offer, especially, of course, in the distributed sector, as people have spoken about, right? The complexities are enormous, right? And standardization, the assumption of standardization, the assumption of I think there are many things which are acting as barriers. Probably, talk about financing, you talk about access, you talk about the solution in itself. The standardization assumption in itself comes as a kind of a barrier to pushing forward a lot of these kind of the solutions forward, so as to say. So I think one of the things that we really need to be mindful about as a kind of sector participants or practitioners is whether we are making realistic assumptions, or these are assumptions that we need to probably relook given the kind of context that we are operating in, right? So these are few of the things that I could reflect on as of now, maybe. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Ms. Purup. So as you all may have noticed, we are missing a policy voice on this table, but that doesn't stop us from thinking about policy. And so maybe if I can ask our panelists to reflect in terms of, as industry bodies or technology specialists or implementing agencies and funders, what are your expectations from a policy framework that frankly already exists, but probably not implemented as such? What are your expectations from policy and policy makers in general to create equitable outcomes through productive uses of renewable energy? So maybe Ganesh, if we can start with you.
I think maybe we should start with the industry, so that, but just to come in here, I think all of us completely understand that if we talk about scale, and when we were attending the morning session on scaling, there also an element of scale. How do we move forward with a scale perspective? Now, if one has to look at the scale perspective, it would only be possible, at least something that we feel, through two options. One is through the system. How do we scale? Through the policy, basically. And the second is through the markets. How do we scale? So these to scale that something that we visualize, and we are hoping that it would happen someday. Now, if you look at it from a systems scale perspective, wherein policy will have to play a very, very important role to look at. And as Harsha mentioned, policy is maybe framed, but unfortunately, what happens is the framing only remains in paper when it has to go into a state level, because states are again dominating actors in this space to look at. They have their own ways of looking at a priority vis-a-vis that particular thematic area to look at. And something that I would basically request from the policy is to see how they can create an enabling environment in the local area for the community to understand what the relevant schemes or programs are, and see if maybe not 100% of the community, but at least a certain percentage of community is able to leverage those schemes and programs. And partners like us actually can facilitate those interactions to look at. Unfortunately, most of the community members do not understand what these schemes or programs are, wherein they can actually take a benefit out of. And somewhere I feel the base that has happened through the SHG movement, the NRLM structure, actually could be a very good, strong building base for seeing how such programs vis-a-vis energy or what you call energy-based livelihoods could be brought in for the larger strengthening of the livelihood that these communities are dependent on. Currently, it is happening, but bits and pieces. There is no, I would say, strong effort from the government side also to see how this connection happens and integration happens. All of us try and feel that the government should have a single window approach to integrate a lot of technologies, which I think all of us know it is, each department is separate, which is a challenging scenario to look at. But somewhere we feel if there is an opportunity to get the government actually to deliver this through a very strong base of these institutions that have been created and see that integration happening, it would be a very positive movement to look at. And the second request is again from practical learnings, is each state government is able to basically design a program at their end, and maybe the World Bank is financing them, or IFAD is financing them, or somebody else. And these are again large programs that they have. Now, if one is able to see such a program, and in that program design itself, they have this point on convergence, which is again very, very difficult for the government also to do convergence within departments. But somewhere I feel such programs and having convergence from different programs and schemes at the government level is very, very critical and important. For us, it is a facilitating opportunity to maybe do that. But how do we push, or maybe push maybe not the right word, but request the government to do that in a systematic manner is going to be very, very critical. So those are some, I would say, requests from our side.
Thanks so much, Ganesh. Since you already nominated Nitin to start, maybe let's hear from Clean.
Policy is very tricky. It can move, it cannot move for decades. So that we have seen, like in the last decade, we had a mini grid policy. We were actually involved in drafting. It didn't move because there was a narrative to take transmission line to the last. And that was, I think, seeing the bigger picture, it makes sense, right? To some extent, given the country's infrastructure, how it has evolved. But in Africa, it's different, right? So that's a part. But if you see how scaling has happened of pumps and Suryagar, government intervention made that happen. Like 4-5 million pumps distributed, unheard of in any part of the world, right? And then similarly, PM Suryagar also. So that's definitely one. And that's a good news also. I think hopefully this should come by February, this policy DRE for livelihood for women. That's a discussion going at MNRE. A lot of stakeholders are here involved in that. And that's also very on equitable outcomes, that we should not, we should be like inclusive in the policy approach. But now again, praying that secretary should not change. These are challenges, right? And we are struggling from 2022. 3 secretaries have changed, and now the 4th secretary. So we have to again go back and square one, and Jethani ji is also tired now. Okay, he's telling. So these are some practical challenges I'm telling you as an industry body. We go hit again, but that's a job hour, right now? That's why we are here. But it's hopeful. But there is more bigger picture to work at subnational, what we have seen now. MNRE okay, it's a different ministry, things are dynamics are different, budgets are low. Sometimes they have narrative from MOP also, which is like a bigger ministry and bigger bandwidth. But subnational ministries and other policies. So what MNRE told, can we, at least that was a good thing, can we converge MORD, mini policies and MOTA, which really has tribal affairs, synergies to local livelihoods, whether it is farm or non-farm. So that's the convergence. I think if they get this two ministry on board, we'll do all our efforts, right? All stakeholders are here on panel and off the panel also to really make some impactful policy. Another thing what they told, last time this policy was taken, I'm telling practicalities, why policy don't work, to Ministry of Finance, okay, because they approve this in the budget. So our Honorable Minister told Sitaramanji, there is already a price for the machine at MOPFP. Why you want another scheme? So then we need to tell them we have to make this from grey to green. Then you have a top-up scheme for that. Rather than having entire scheme for policy for machine as well as RE, why can't we look at that? That's why that policy was stuck there. Now we have to really be cautious what input we give as a as a sector to Ministry of Finance. And hopefully I think that consultation will happen in next 2 months. We have tomorrow again a meeting scheduled for that. And all of your inputs will be really valid to at least see like now on 1st February, we have some good news, right? If not, then we'll keep trying. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Nitin. So we've heard convergence, we've heard about continuity in policy making and, in the narrative itself. Neha, I'm counting on you to give me another C, and then I'll come to this with.
I think for the DRE sector, there is a need, as you clearly articulated, of having a directional, clear roadmap and policy. I mean, we have policy and, we have our national goals set out for energy efficiency, doubling energy efficiency, tripling RE, adding more capacity and generation from RE point of view. But how does DRE how is DRE getting integrated, and what's the role for it? I think there isn't enough clarity or directional roadmap. Once that is there, I think it'll provide a lot of confidence to the industry. It'll provide a lot of confidence to investors, financiers, and it'll kind of help mobilize overall ecosystem. And it can be, I understand the implementation happens at the subnational level, and there has to be like a lot more elements that need to come together. But if there is a directional roadmap which kind of lays out the intent and the clarity and provides clarity from the government, I think that would be like a good start. And all the things that you mentioned around equity and inclusivity should be part of it, but there has to be like something which kind of provides like a clear roadmap and direction for the sector, which I think is a gap at the moment.
Great, you've done better. You've given me 2 C's: clarity of narrative and the role of DRE, and the confidence in technology that needs to be built based on the policy interventions that are there. Viswaroop, you know the challenge.
Yeah, I think I'd like to highlight only one thing around policies, which I think is very critical. So, which I often find missing in many of the discussions and narratives that we go forward. Right. So, when we talk about green transition, green economy, and everything, right? What I'm blown away with, what I really find very fascinating is the entrepreneurial kind of talent that really exists, right? And they're really trying to solve these kind of problems, which were mentioned earlier. But how we can bring in more support to this ecosystem is very crucial and important from my perspective, because I think in most of the narratives and discussion around green transition and green economy, it will be nice to also have some sort of spotlight on the distributed sector as well, which really is solving real problems for real people, right? Yeah. So, and which is more kind of bottoms up, and it becomes more critical in terms of the climate change scenario as well. While it's important to talk about like mitigation, right, which comes for most kind of the technologies that we talk about, adaptation is very crucial, and what we are seeing day in day out, and it's very real. I think for a farmer who is struggling with drought or floods, Yeah, so there the distributed energy can play a very crucial role, and there's an importance to recognize and spotlight that and highlight that as well.
Yeah, thanks, Vishwarup. I think it's true. I mean, most of our targets speak to mitigation, but very few efforts actually highlight the potential of adaptation in that the RE sector can play, and that's a very valid ask to give that kind of importance to the sector in itself in the larger scheme of things, and not just look at supply options, and also try and look at what really is happening on the ground. Do we have any questions that we can answer? So let me ask my colleague Priti to read out a few questions for our panelists. Yeah.
Thanks, Harsha. So on the Venti, we have received a few questions for our panelists. So I'll go through the question one by one. So first, I would like to ask Neha. So as we scale renewable energy uptake, efficiency and circularity is often overlooked. So what can be some of the solutions for this? Okay, sure. Second question, we would like to get answer from Ganesh. How can renewable energy powered cold storage be made accessible and affordable for marginal and small land farmers who often deal with high post harvest losses? And another question again to Ganesh. Land fragmentation is increasingly rapidly is going in India, where not many farmers are financially capable to fund all their field with renewable energy sources. So how the anchor institution are filling that gap? Another question for Nitin. So does renewable energy adoption becomes less efficient when land is fragmented? Example, smaller solar irrigation pumps versus shared community systems. And an overall question which any of the panelists would be interested to answer is, what are the factors that keep the sector restrained into a zero-sum game? What must be done to break the status quo? Thanks.
Great. Thanks. Thanks, Priti. Neha, you want to start? Yeah. I think it's a very important question. The importance of efficiency within excess space is not often talked about as explicitly as it should be. We look at renewable energy as a clean source, and we think that that's where we have to kind of focus on, which is right. But I think the interplay of energy efficiency is very important, because then with the same amount of resources, you're either able to provide more services, or with the lesser resources you can get more output, and that's the role of efficiency. And if as and when we are focusing more on solarization, more on renewable energy integration, the role of storage also comes into play. And with more efficiency, I think the overall operational cost kind of comes down, the overall capex also comes down. So it's a very important, the overall need for capacity addition kind of comes down. So we have a big program which focuses on integrating efficiency into access. It's called E4A. It's funded by UK FCDO, and this is the primary point where we focus on how do you integrate the two. And there's a lot of research that has been done. There's a lot of evidence that has been kind of demonstrated. I'm happy to share more details with you after this conversation. Thank you. Great, thanks. Nitin, do you want to answer the question to you?
Yeah. On RE land fragmentation and RE adoption, I think we do find challenge in that for sure, at least what the practitioners in our network has suggested. But they're also evolving the model, kind of pay per use for water, right? If you see in Hardoi, Barabanki, Lakhimpur, Gonda district of Uttar Pradesh, lands have become fragmented. 1947 में हमें आजादी मिली, राइट? 4 जनरेशन हमारे हो गए, तो 10 हेक्टर से अभी 1 हेक्टर तक आ गया हमारा लैंड होल्डिंग. So how they're trying to use it, a pump model, very innovative or very practical, and that are shared by 14 farmers. Okay. And we know the pattern, how it understands. That's where these energy practitioners are also becoming or taking help of farm advisory to evolve that model, right? Or support of anchor institution, because they know much better the ground realities. So that collaborative models are very important to address RE adoption. And I think that was the question, right?
Ganesh?
Yeah.
So on the cold storages, and I think link point to small and marginal farmers, I would say if you look at the cold storages which are like 5 metric ton or 10 metric tons, they are not suitable for small and marginal farmers. That's been the experience, and I think that's also come up from the study very strongly. The challenge is not on what you call food waste at a smallholder level. Because for a small and marginal farmer to move from, say, a paddy, a maize, or a millet cultivation, not saying completely move, but moving part of the land to a vegetable or a horticulture, it's going to be only part. It's going to be maybe half an acre or maximum an acre of land parcel because of various other constraints that a small and marginal family faces. Now, with that particular land holding and the cultivation that is happening, say on vegetable, the produce that comes out, and maybe multiple farmers doing in that particular geography, they are, I think the study also very strongly emphasized that they are looking at it to be sold directly into the market within maybe 1 day or 2 days time. So that storage factor of a 5 metric ton or a 10 metric ton does not actually make sense. And you'll see multiple such cold storages across the country, which are hardly 20-30% in utilization. And I strongly feel they'll not go more than, say, 50% utilization, even if the anchor institution keeps on pushing that to happen. And there have been, I think, ways and means that organizations have tried to evolve, like keep it in a marketplace, like the hut. You keep it in a hut, you are seeing multiple players who are trying to sell their produce. They use it as a service. Now, that's in a way not the actual what you call plan that was to be done for the cold storage to look at. But the way one is trying to look at is see how you can further decentralize this. Say from a 5 metric ton coming to maybe 1 metric ton or even lesser than that. That makes a lot of sense for a small and marginal farmer, not also an individual, but at an farmer producer company level. And there are technology players like TAN90 and DD Solar type players who actually are trying to do something to go much lower in terms of the decentralization. So cold storage of 5 metric ton, you are bringing that much below because that's the actual need for a small and marginal farmer to look at. So unfortunately, the whole cold storage ecosystem with a certain size is not something that is working for most of the small and marginal farmers. It can work nearer to Pune, it can work nearer to Bangalore, but it is not working in Jharkhand. Even nearer to Ranchi, it is not something that is working. So that's a point to place. On the land fragmentation, I think as Nitin also emphasized, we are seeing the fragmentation happening. And something that we learned while working with the communities, mainly the tribal communities in this case, is even if the lands are fragmented, and if you look at the terrains, you'll see the lowlands, midlands, and uplands in most of these geographies. Lowlands are mostly for paddy cultivation and only maybe one crop. But the midlands and uplands are something that one has to try and see how we can make them more productive. See how you're creating an irrigation resource and then seeing how the resource could be placed in the midlands and uplands, and see how vegetable and other, say, cash crops could be cultivated. Now, while doing that, you are basically trying to also see how we are institutionalizing them into producer groups and other structures to use that resource, the irrigation resource, which is not the solar resource, but the groundwater in this case, and the energy combination together at a group level. And that's where fragmentation, even if it is, say, 30 decimals, 50 decimals, or maybe more than 50 decimals land parcel each family has, that group is able to actually cultivate and see a better return out of it. The study also highlighted that also incentivizes the group to manage the system in a much better manner, pay for those what you call after sales, maintenance, and other related aspects. We strongly feel those are, I think, opportunities for us to create at a larger scale. And each of these producer group or so-called production hub, if you are able to look at it as a business unit for a farmer producer organization, multiple such business units actually can help the farmer producer organization also to ensure that they are providing those relevant services to the producer groups and then also seeing the market connection. So it's a combination then one has to look at rather than looking at fragmentation as a challenge. It is a challenge, no doubt, but how do you use it as an opportunity from a context perspective is something that we are trying to see in this case. So that's
Yeah.
that's one.
Thanks so much, Ganesh. Vishwarup, do you want to weigh in on the question on factors that keep the sector in being still a gamble and still a zero-sum game?
Can you help me?
The question was, what are the factors that are still keeping the DRE sector in the state of a zero-sum game where, one entity wins and the other entities either loses or sort of loses?
Okay, let's be fair with the sector itself, because I think we are quite at an early stage of development, right? The sector in itself, look at from a broader perspective, it's been like hardly in last decade it has only picked up, right? And so I think but within that decade only we are seeing a lot of movements happening, and probably we want the results very fast, but also keeping in mind the growth of our sector, right, which is normally is a kind of a long run kind of a game. I think we need to keep on pushing the right levers and drivers, and the momentum should not be stopping, right? So that's the key message that I'd like to give in here, right?
Thanks. I think we have a couple more questions, 2 more questions. So Preeti, if you can read them out for us.
Thank you to our panelists. So we have got 2 additional questions. So one is for Nitin. So how can we focus on community outreach for pure technologies? And another could be answered by any of the panelists. So from a policy making perspective, what are the biggest bottlenecks you see in the transmission and distribution ecosystem, especially regarding grid integration, storage, and last mile delivery?
Thanks. Interesting questions.
As an industry body, I was always thinking, people, why we are lagging its awareness and sensitization of pure technologies. So हम यात्रा निकालने का सोच रहे थे अभी DRE यात्रा. To be very honest, I see there are almost 75-80 people, and a lot of young people are there in this session. I think these are the torch bearers for us to really take this yatra to each and corner of our country. I think if that can happen, actually what NASSCOM did in 1989, I'm just studying the industry association history. वो piracy कैसा हटाई CD का copy कर देते. So one elephant was brought near Nehru Palace, and that elephant broke the CD. Nehru Palace, you know, right ना, वहाँ piracy hub होता है, right? 1989 की बात है. I was not born, might be 1 or 2 years old.
Also again.
Yeah, so ऐसा कुछ हो सकता है सेक्टर में करना चाहिए. Definitely, I think we might start with Northeast, which I feel like is a priority area for clean and our country also. तो ऐसा एकदम 116 जिला है वहां पे 7 स्टेट में, और अमेजिंग पोटेंशियल हो सकता है where sensitization will come to all the stakeholder. So you can sign up for DRE Yatra. Might be, I think that is on really, I'm on a serious note, I'm telling, right? This is going to happen at least till my tenure. Okay. And second is, integration, right? I also come from India Energy Storage Alliance. TS runs that.
Yeah.
And from where I get my bread and butter working. There is a study right now. In Nigeria, it has worked. Husk is really doing this in a massive scale. We work with minigrid. We have 13 minigrid players in our network in India itself. And in India, we have challenges, and not challenges meaning willingness from Discom, right? Because the infrastructure at Discom level is not ready to absorb the extra energy that will come. And the synchronization. As an electrical engineer, we can talk more deep into that. What Amelinda did, they connected two distribution infrastructure together. And that was innovative. Because one minigrid was underutilized in Gumla, Naratoli, and one was Pasanga. Okay, and it was 30 kilowatt, it was 18. And they really started exchanging the power. But now what happened, while doing so, voltage started dropping. So we suggested put some step-up transformer, or booster transformer, not step-up to be precise. So there are some innovations happening, but I think there is good chances. We have seen Tata Power's news coming from Odisha. The 1 kilowatt system they are putting on houses, and they'll generate 100 units. And they're trying to integrate, because now privatization, it's a sensitive topic, happens, right? And it is on verge, especially in UP after 2027. That is a big inroad for mini-grids or off-grid companies acting as a franchises for the Discoms. And then Uday 1, Uday 2, lot of Udays will not come, right? We have infused 55,000 crore, 60,000 crore for just floating the Discom companies. So they are willing, but we need to have that dialogue. I think that's very important. Samvad hona chahiye, right? At least we should approach. And with political will in UP and other states, I think there are promises we feel. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. And there's a lot of interesting work happening in Odisha in terms of interconnections.
Exactly.
And that might pave the way for the rest of the country to follow. So please join me in thanking our panelists for their time today. Big round of applause for them. Just to conclude, I mean, I don't want to talk about what we already discussed. I think lots of very interesting points for us to consider. But just to bring back, where we started. So there are two aspects that I would like to highlight based on our observations from the field and also based on the research that we've conducted. So, in unequal societies, and we know a lot of these societies are present in many parts of our country. It so happens that one group's access to technology can turn into another group's inability to access opportunities in one way or the other. And while some technologies, especially those related to basic energy access, right, and social uses, like Lanman mentioned earlier, so you can think about LED bulbs, or you can think about lamps, or household electrification, or you can think of cooking fuels, health facility electrification. These are effective when you have universal adoption of these technologies, and you need like blanket approaches for these to be put up. But this next generation of renewable energy appliances or applications, which focus on productive uses, they don't really require universal coverage of the technology, but we are rather pushed towards optimization of resource utilization when we come to productive uses of energy. And that's either the most efficient utilization of the natural resource, for example, the water when the irrigation pumps are being utilized. Or if you think about, not everyone will benefit from having a solar cold storage in a particular area, right? And that market will have limits, and we will basically be limited in terms of the growth that we are facing because of the limitations that we have on resources available. So while renewable energy technologies may seem like an exception because we don't have variable costs for the fuel or things like that, like we saw in the fossil fuel systems, the cost of resources that are needed to develop these technologies and propagate these technologies then become the cause of the optimization that is needed in that particular geography. So we optimize our efforts. We optimize our efforts in a variety of ways. We will look at what's the easiest way to do business, or what's the easiest place to do business, what are the easiest people to do business with, what's the easiest way to implement a scheme, how can we quickly get applications filled up for a particular scheme, or how can we get the maximum impact from a short funding duration if possible. We basically look at inducing an ease of business in one way or the other. But we look for numbers of installations, we look for energy generated, we look for kilograms processed, we look for liters pumped in terms of water. We rarely really get into the food, water, energy nexus and what impact that will have on the water resource. Or we rarely get into, should it be an individual pump? Should it be a community-owned pump? What will actually be the most optimal way of providing the service that we are trying to look at? Or when it comes to cold storage or agri-processing, where, like I said, every entrepreneur in the village or a community cannot own these assets. It would be pointless for everyone to own these assets and would provide the same service with diminishing utility and diminishing marginal utility. So this challenge of diminishing marginal utility requires us that at some point, the push for productive use for energy through entrepreneurship that will result in asset ownership will lead to zero-sum games. Not every cold storage will succeed. There will be a second or the third or the fourth one will actually not succeed if it's especially if it's a new technology. And so this is a quest for creating wins in a zero-sum game eventually. And that really requires us to think very deeply about technology transfer, about where are we creating assets, who is owning those assets, who is actually operating those assets, who gets market access, who gets resource access, and then are we really perpetuating similar, the same sort of power relations as they exist right now, or are we trying to break some molds and actually create equality? So that's the first aspect I wanted to highlight. The second aspect is that it really does make an impact in terms of which group gets access and which group does not get access. And so from our understanding of the energy transition, we see that there will be three groups in the energy transition who will need to be engaged with. There will be one group for whom the energy transition will make a lot of sense. They will always benefit from it. They will be early adopters. They will, move quickly because they have the funds, they have the technology understanding, they are aware of it. There will be one group which will need a lot of support. It will need cajoling, it will need pushing, support, incentives, whatever may be the case. And then there will be a third group who will probably not get any cajoling, who will not get any inputs or will not get incentives or support. And so if we are really serious about getting everybody together in this energy transition, some of our focus has to be, I would argue a lot of our focus has to be on that third group that needs the support, that needs the push, and it will not just be incentives that will be needed. They will need the finance. They will need the technology sort of propagation to be a lot more easier than it is the other people. And we know we know who this group is, right? It will be a different group in every geography. It can be a different group in Nagaland. It can be a different group in Jharkhand. It can be a different group in Delhi, for that matter. And each of those groups, we sort of have an inkling what this is. They could be women, they could be tribal populations, they could be marginalized populations. But we almost always assume that our policies and our schemes and programs actually are for the benefit of that group. And that may not be the case. And that awareness is very, very important, that our policies are designed towards actually supporting that group as well, and not just the ones who need support. Just a medium level of support might be useful. So what, in terms of the DRE sector, if we are really aiming for this particular set of technologies, such as productive use of renewable energy, or agrivoltaics, or rooftop solar, or biomass technologies, or clean cooking fuels, and so on and so forth, if we really want these technologies to support this last group of people, this third group of people, we need to pay attention to the differential impacts of these technologies. It will not be the case that each of these technologies affects all of these groups similarly. And if we are not paying attention to these differential impacts, we will lose the plot pretty quickly. And so we cannot stop, for example, at number targets and physical achievement targets. We cannot just, look at, like I mentioned earlier, the units installed or the units generated and things like that. And what we really need to do is to understand who benefited from the technology, who accessed it, who benefited from it, and what outcome actually came from that benefit sharing of the technology. And when we are able to see and understand all of these aspects, perhaps then we will be able to really say that we created wins from zero-sum games. And with that, let me thank you for joining us for this session. And please join us for lunch. Thank you so much for your attention.